So I want to thank everybody tonight. I see a lot more names than I see names on the screen. So I'm feeling everybody's having internet trouble tonight. So hopefully we can get through this. Um, we do have we do have a link to the Google Drive, which has contains the presentation in as well. Um, so my name is Patty Schramm. I'm the Parent Resource Trainer Coordinator for the SALT Talks. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. We're going to be touching on funding, available funding. What does that mean? What does that look like? And then just kind of what is available and how do we use that? What is it? That was something I stumbled on, back when I first started, is understanding this whole piece of the transition part. So tonight our speaker is Sheila Bloom, and I'm hoping our internet holds together fine for tonight, and get through as much as we can. But I'll go ahead and pull the presentation up. Sheila, if you want to just introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Sheila Bloom, and I am the Fiscal Services Manager for the Greene County Board of DD.
There we go. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Perfect.
Okay.
Uh,
And just let me know when to advance the screens for you, okay?
okay. No problem. Um, so tonight, I'm more than happy to stop and answer questions if anyone has questions. But we're just going to go over a little bit about waiver services and kind of the history of waivers, and then just some recent changes and funding source options like Patty was talking about. So we'll talk about eligibility for waiver services, the Ohio assessment for immediate needs and current needs, also called a waiting list assessment in some counties. And then we'll just talk a little bit about the three different waivers administered by the county board: the individual options waiver, the level one waiver, and the self waiver. So if you want to hit the next slide, please. All right, so a little bit of background information on waivers. Waivers are part of federal Medicaid rules, and so individuals have to be eligible for and enrolled in Medicaid in order to receive a waiver through the Ohio Department of DD, which is administered by the county boards. Waiver services, the term waiver is a little bit of a complicated topic, but essentially what it means is that you are waiving services in an institutional type setting and instead are choosing to have those services delivered in a community setting or in an individual's home. So that's really what you're waiving. It's not, saying that you don't want anything. It's just saying that where the services are going to be delivered. There are different waiver programs for different populations. Obviously, we serve the DD population. There's the Ohio Home Care Waiver, which is medically fragile individuals and also some individuals eligible for DD services. There's passport waivers, there's aging waivers. So there's all kinds of different waivers that are operated through Medicaid and then through the different agencies after that. The evolution of DD waivers over the years, we've gone from, just real basic local funding to adding a little bit of funding for individuals receiving services in group settings, to now we cover a wide range of services from community, in-home, group settings. We're really focused on self-directed services right now, so it's expanded quite a bit over the years. The initial enrollment process, like I said, an individual has to be eligible for Medicaid. Your county board can with that process if that's something your family member already receives. Each county is going to be a little bit different. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight is how we do things in Greene County. If you have questions about other counties, I'm more than happy to connect you with folks in those other counties, and I'll have my contact information at the end. you can feel free to reach out to me and I can help you navigate that in Greene County as well. A really cool thing about waivers is that you can take a waiver anywhere within the state of Ohio. So if you live in Greene County and you move to Cuyahoga County, that waiver can go with you. So it's a nice option to have flexibility within the state of Ohio. However, if you leave the state of Ohio, that waiver unfortunately will have to be disenrolled. If you want to go to the next slide. So like I said, with the eligibility for Medicaid waivers, you do have to go through Medicaid eligibility, which also includes verification of eligibility for Social Security benefits. Again, each county has a person that can help you through that process. And then you have to meet what is called an intermediate level of care. And really what that means is that we go through an assessment called a level of care assessment, and that determines whether or not your individual or your loved one meets a specific level of care. So this means that they have areas that they need assistance in with their daily living skills, and that they could be eligible for services within a facility. Like I said, you're waiving that and choosing to have services within the community. So that level of care is what helps to determine an individual's need for waiver services and that they meet the specific level of care. Another question is, could the individual benefit from ongoing services and supports and receive at least one waiver service per year? That is still a little bit under suspension thanks to COVID. When COVID first happened, obviously we weren't receiving supports in the homes, people weren't going out in the community. So DODD and Medicaid suspended that requirement. We're slowly getting back towards requiring that at least one waiver service is used annually. And that could be something as simple as home delivered meals. If you have an individual who's medically fragile and you don't necessarily want folks in and out of your home providing care, there are other supports that we can offer that will help you to use that waiver. So benefiting from ongoing services can be anything from help with daily living tasks to transportation is a big one right now, employment services, day programming. There's a wide range of services that are offered underneath the waiver that we can use to help benefit an individual's life. The level 1 waiver was kind of originally set up to assist folks that maybe didn't need a whole lot of supports in the home, but had a network of family and friends that they, relied on to help get them out in the community, go grocery shopping, maybe take them out bowling, those kind of things. And so it's a lower funding range. And it was really meant as just kind of a supplement to services and natural supports that individuals were receiving. Self-waiver was originally designed for folks who could direct some of their services on their own. So this may be choosing who to hire to work with them, what kind of services they wanted, if there were specific items that an individual felt would benefit them and help them to increase their independence. This is kind of where that self-waiver was originally designed. It's a little bit more flexible in some of the services that you can receive, in that they don't necessarily have to be provided by a Medicaid approved or DODD certified provider. Those things can include various adaptive equipment, DME items, therapy services that may or may not be covered under other waivers. And the cool thing is that we have recently added some self-directed services to the level 1 waiver to help kind of expand what's available to those folks as well. You want to go to the next slide? So how do we determine who gets a waiver? What we currently have in place throughout the state of Ohio is the Ohio Assessment for Immediate Needs and Current Needs. So every county's process is slightly different. In Greene County, you can request a waiting list assessment. Your service coordinator can request one on your behalf. There's multiple ways that we can trigger this process. Historically, what would happen is you would just ask to be on the waiting list and we would put you on a waiting list. So about 2017, I believe, been a while, they did what was called a fix the list process. And what that did is we reviewed everybody that had been on the waiting list. We had folks that were on the waiting list an average of 10 years or more waiting for waiver services, simply because folks said, hey, I just want to be on the waiting list for in the future. And that resulted in a lot of people waiting quite a long time for services. So now we've gone to a need-based assessment. So this assessment will help to determine what, if any, needs your individual has and how to best meet that. An outcome of a current need means that within the next 12 months or so, we can see that there's a possibility for an increased need in services and supports. A good example of this is your loved one may be getting ready to separate from high school. High school separation means a lot of big changes. So it may be that your individual is in school all day and looking ahead post-graduation, you're looking for something for your loved one to do during the day. Day programming is an option, employment services, volunteering, all of those things can help meet that need of ensuring health and safety throughout the day. So that's usually what we see current needs as. It could be, you have your primary caregiver is scheduled for an upcoming major surgery. And that's going to significantly alter, again, your health and safety needs. So those are some things that we see that could trigger a current need. An immediate need is something where we see in the next 30 to 90 days, we're going to be in kind of a rough situation. Again, this could be a significant change in living situation, significant medical changes, those kind of things. So if we see that there's a need, then we look at, are there alternative funding sources that we can use to meet that need? Is it a one-time need? Say somebody just needs a ramp to get in and out of their home to make things more accessible. That's a one-time need that we could probably help to address with local funds. So that may not require a full waiver enrollment. We may be able to partner with a community resource who is looking for volunteer opportunities and they could help provide and install a ramp. So there's multiple ways that we can look at addressing a need without necessarily leading to waiver enrollment. In Greene County, what happens is we have our intake and eligibility specialists who complete any requested assessment needs. So they'll do the waiting list assessment, and then depending on the outcome, we have an internal review team made up of a wide range of staff members from the SSA department, the Medicaid billing department, and we all sit down and eligibility, we all sit down, review the case, talk about what the outcome is, and then we look at how best to meet that need. Is that going to be alternative resources? What does that look like? Does it mean waiver enrollment? And then what type of waiver is best going to need to meet the needs of that individual? Once that's determined, then we will communicate that with the family, and then we can go from there. So if you are determined to have an immediate or a current need, then you go on the waiting list. Again, each county is slightly different. Right now, Greene County, I believe, has less than 5 folks that are currently on our waiting list. So it's a lot quicker process to address the needs of individuals who are in a crisis situation or who are needing services now, as opposed to saying, well, I might need services down the road. So it's a little bit of a faster way for us to help address those needs. Okay, if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so here is one of the 3 waivers that's currently administered by the county board. This is the individual options or the IO waiver. The IO waiver funding for that waiver is based on an assessment called an ODDP, or Ohio Developmental Disabilities Profile. What this does is we have a couple of folks in Greene County who complete our DDPs, and through that DDP process, it is entered into the state DODD system, and how those questions are answered will give us a funding range from 1 to 9. That is what sets the budget limit for the services for that individual. Now, there is a prior authorization process for the IO waiver should the needs for health and safety exceed what that budget funding range is. And we have a whole internal process for that, as well as do other counties. Some of the services available under the IO waiver include homemaker personal care, which is like aid type services, somebody to come in and assist with daily living tasks, transportation, those kind of services. Transportation is a service as well. Home modifications, including ramps, grab bars, bathroom modifications, accessible showers, raised toilets. Respite care can be done in or out of the home, depending on the needs. Remote supports, it's exactly what it sounds like. There's a wide range of supports available through this option, from prompting for medications, helping to ensure health and safety by allowing individuals to see who's at their door before they go to the door, checking in remotely as opposed to staff physically going out to homes. There's a lot of different ways that that can look depending on an individual's specific situation. Home delivered meals are another great option. We have we have a few companies that will do home delivered meals. They do different diets, dietary restrictions, low sodium, low carb, insulin diets, diabetic diets, all of those kinds of things. Next slide, please. So the individual options waiver has, as have all the waivers, seen some changes as of January 1st this year. And then the rates will be changing again July 1st of this year. Some of the new changes include a new service called residential respite, and that is done in conjunction with shared living. Shared living is a service where an individual can receive services from someone that they are living with. That may or may not be a family member. It may be a provider that they live with. It may be somebody that they share a home with. And that person can become certified for shared living and kind of envelop that individual as a part of their family and their daily routine. Residential respite was designed to give shared living providers a little bit of a break and still allow them to bill for the rest of the services within that day. Another big change, which I'm sure lots of families have heard about, is a new rule entitled Parents of Minors as Paid Caregivers. This is a brand new hot topic that kind of came out as a result of COVID. And what this is a new formalized process for parents to become certified and paid as caregivers for their minor children. There is a evaluation process called the Extraordinary Care Assessment that will need to be completed. Again, each county is going to structure that process and evaluation system a little bit differently. But this is a method where if a family truly cannot find willing and able providers to come in and work with their minor child, that it is a way for that child to receive care. Like I just said, the rate increases for just about all of the waiver services happen July 1st of this year, or January 1st, excuse me, and will happen again July 1st. So this has resulted in some budget changes. There's been an increase in pay for most of the waiver services, not all of them. But again, it's a way to incentivize providers to help work with our individuals. Next
Sheila,
slide.
Sheila, can you define a little bit shared living?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like I don't want to say it's a new term, but it kind of surfaced a few years ago. And I know I get several parents that ask, what exactly is it?
Yep, no problem. So shared living was originally designed so that, let's say you had a neighbor down the street who lived on her own, had some open rooms in her home, and had a really good relationship with your individual. And your individual moved in with them and became a part of their life and their family setup. Shared living was intended to help to pay that provider for incorporating this individual into their home. So instead of being billed on a 15-minute unit rate like our HPC services are, shared living is a daily rate. So the intention behind that is that providers receive a daily rate for providing that daily care for an individual because they are a part of their household. It's not something above and beyond. It's something that they've kind of integrated into your household. Now, what it has also kind of developed into is for individuals who have stayed at home past graduation, families become certified as their provider. And again, that provider is able to bill a daily rate and incorporates, their daily routines into the care and needs of that individual. So shared living is really kind of what it sounds like. You are sharing the living environment, tasks, responsibilities, all of that, just like you would as any family member. So it is a way for family members and parents, caregivers who live with their individuals to receive payment as providers. This is for adults. So this is one of the biggest differences between shared living and the parents of minor caregivers or the extraordinary care rule. Shared living is for individuals that are over the age of 18, and extraordinary care is for minor children. We have a lot of kind of odd dates and years that are important in the DD field. Um, we review eligibility at 16 years old. An individual can separate from high school at any point up to the age of 22. At 18, they're considered legally an adult unless guardianship is in place. Um, and so the whole classification of adult can get a little complicated sometimes. But shared living is for individuals over the age of 18, and the extraordinary care is for individuals under the age of 18. Does that answer some of your questions, Patty? Okay. If you want to go ahead and scroll to the next slide, please. So the level 1 waiver is another waiver administered by the county boards. This waiver, in my opinion, has probably seen the most amount of change over the last handful of years. The level 1 waiver really used to be right at about $5,000 a year for services. And then there was a separate budget for day programming, non-medical transportation, employment services, that kind of thing. However, a handful of years ago, that changed. So now the level 1 waiver and all of an individual services come out of one pot of money. So everything that your individual receives, whether it's homemaker personal care, aid services, transportation, employment, day programming, home modifications, anything like that, all of that has to come out of one pot of money. So we now have a difference between an adult and a child budget. And again, this is where the definitions get a little quirky. In this case, an adult budget means an individual that has formally separated from school. So they are no longer receiving any educational services. They will not be returning to an educational services setting. Again, the age for that can be a little bit different for every situation, but it does mean an individual that has formally separated from school. Um, the difference in the amount of the child and the adult budget is really meant to capture those adult services, the day programming, non-medical transportation, employment services, those kind of things that are only applicable to individuals who have separated from school. Thank you for posting the waiver simplification link in the chat. This is a quick link on the DODD website that really provides some updated information of waiver services, and in my opinion, does a better job of breaking down the terminology and the differences in a much more simplified manner than if you were to go in and try and read the Medicaid rules. The rules can be incredibly overwhelming and complex and confusing. The waiver simplification, they've done a great job of sending out little like one-page blurbs that give you a nice summary of what each waiver is and what the recent changes have been. So the current adult budget is $62,136, and the child budget is $41,424 per span. Now, for folks that may not be familiar with span years for waivers, again, those are a little quirky. So it's not a calendar year, it's not a fiscal year. It is based on the level of care date for that specific individual. So let's say you enroll on a waiver today, March 5th. Your level of care date is going to be March 5th. So your span year is going to run March 5th through March 4th. So that is the amount of time that you have for that specific budget. Another frequently asked question, no, the budgets don't roll over. So it's not like you can save what you don't spend this year and add it to next year. Those funds start and stop at the level of care date. There's no rolling over, unfortunately. So the level of care date or the span year is unique to each individual. And your case manager or your SSA will help you to kind of keep track of that and stay on top of those dates. PDGS is a relatively new service available on the level 1 waiver. It was historically only available on the self waiver. PDGS stands for Participant Directed Goods and Services. And I've been around long enough that I'm going to use the horrible example that first came out when the self waiver was first rolled out. An example of a PDGS item is going to be a microwave. I'm sorry for anybody that's been around long enough to hear this one. Let's say you have an individual who is able to prepare some meals on their own, but needs a little bit of assistance with cooking or meal prep. But if they had a microwave, they would be a little bit more independent and not need as much staffing or HPC services. PDGS is an option where we could use an individual's waiver to purchase that microwave for them to help them become more independent and therefore have a decrease in the amount of services that they were needing. A microwave is a terrible example, but it's the time-honored one that has been around since the self waiver rolled out. Again, each county is a little bit different in how they go about approving PDGS requests. In Greene County, we have, again, an internal review committee that will look at medical needs, we'll look at the habilitative intent. So like I said, in this scenario, the intention is for an individual to become more independent and therefore not need as much staffing. We'll look at, do we really think an individual can do this? Have we addressed safety concerns? Top one that comes to mind is, let's say they're going to do one of those fantastic little mac and cheese cups. Do they know that they have to put water in that? Or they're going to, it's going to catch on fire. So those are some of the things that our review committee will take a look at. When we're reviewing PDGS requests is we'll take a look at that specific individual's ISP, their needs, we'll talk with their SSA. And there is an opportunity for the family to contribute to that as well and say, this is what we're looking for, this is why, this is how we think it would help, those kind of things. So PDGS is new to the level 1, and within that $62,000 or $41,000, only $2,500 of that per span can be spent on PDGS under the level 1 waiver. So each waiver has its own little quirks as far as what can and cannot be used for the funding. Self-directed transportation is another hot topic. Those of you in Greene County know that we have some limited options as far as transportation is concerned. Obviously, we don't have the big mass transit system that say Montgomery County or Hamilton County has. So self-directed transportation is a nice opportunity for an individual to try and meet those transportation needs without necessarily having to go through a certified DODD waiver provider. This can look a little bit different in each scenario. This can look like Uber, Lyft, somebody getting certified independently to do transportation. There's a lot of different ways that we can kind of help meet a transportation need, and self-directed transportation is one of those. So if you want to scroll to the next slide. Self-waiver. That cost cap didn't get updated. Ignore that 30,000. That's what it used to be for children. So self-waiver has a whole bunch of different services underneath it that are not available under the level 1 and the IO waiver. Some of these unique services are participant-directed HPC, which basically means that it looks exactly like HPC under the other waivers. However, with this option, individuals and family members have a little bit more flexibility on how much they would like to pay their caregivers. So participant-directed HPC has a negotiated rate for independent providers, not agencies, just independents. This means that between the family, the SSA, and the Medicaid department, we look at the individual's budget, we look at the range, and then we help the individual to decide how much they want to pay that particular independent provider to work with them. Again, it's still within a window, but there's some flexibility on how you choose to spend that money and what rate of pay you set for that provider. Obviously, the more you pay your provider, the faster the budget's going to go. So that negotiated rate is something that gets signed and can be changed at any point during the span year through the SSA. And again, it's a negotiated rate within a set amount of money, but it does give the individual some flexibility in determining how they want to spend their budget. Participant-directed goods and services, we already talked about a little bit. Clinical therapeutic intervention, or CTI services. The best way I can explain this is it can look similar to, not exactly, please don't take that, can look similar to ABA type therapies or more specialized caregiver type services. So this may occur in a home setting, it may occur in a therapeutic setting. And this service actually has 3 different tiers within it. So depending on the certification of the caregiver providing the service, that will determine what the billing rate is for that service. So if you have somebody that has a bachelor's degree, I'm blanking on a service right now, but has a bachelor's degree and is working with your individual, they will be a tier 1. Say a master's degree, tier 2. Doctorate degree, clinical therapist, that's going to be your higher funding range. So we have individuals that will receive oversight from, say, somebody with a master's degree or a doctorate, and then more frequent one-on-one services with somebody at a different tier to kind of help address behavioral needs, therapeutic needs, um, just a little bit more skilled professional type services than your typical HPC services. And that usually will go hand in hand with a functional behavioral assessment. A functional behavioral assessment can be completed once a year, and then this will kind of help direct how those clinical therapeutic intervention services are delivered. Family stability, participant stability assistance. Again, this is more like a family counseling type service. This is more of a wraparound type service to help develop service and supports and systems more in a home setting, but also can be daycare, schools, to really help develop a comprehensive program for individuals. Residential and community respite is similar to the other waiver services or under other waivers. Remote supports and assistive tech. Assistive tech is a interesting service. We've seen Ring doorbells, Ring cameras, all kinds of fancy new technology pieces and gadgets and things that make me feel really old some days because I don't understand them. Have to ask my kids. But it's, again, it's ways to incorporate technology into meeting health and safety needs, keeping individuals connected in their community, a wide range of different services and needs that that item can meet. Support brokerage is a service that we don't necessarily see a whole lot, at least in Greene County. What it is it can be up to $8,000 per year that you basically hire somebody to help you navigate these waivers, the waiver systems, the authorization, and work with the family, the SSA, and the provider to meet the needs. Support brokerage services oftentimes look a lot like SSA services, so we typically don't see families access that a whole lot. Since they do have access to an SSA that can help them coordinate those services, but it is a service that's available. Okay, next slide. This is, again, the same services are available to adults that are available to children. However, with the addition of adult day array and non-medical transportation. So non-medical transportation is going to be any transportation to volunteer sites, employment, day programming, community integration, those kinds of services. Adult day array can be going to, a specific facility, location, outings in the community, or employment services, job coaching, as long as it's through OOD is a little bit different than job coaching through waiver services. A lot of times they will go hand in hand and follow each other, but they're not typically done at the same time. So again, the self-waiver, all of the services have to fall within that funding cap. And that is, a primary job of your SSA is to help you manage that budget and to keep your authorization within the scope of service and to determine exactly what the needs of your individual are. So next slide, please. Again, here's a little bit more on adult day supports. We're really looking at enhancing participation in the community. Again, meeting health and safety needs, whatever that looks like for your individual. We have lots of individuals that do a combination of services. So they may volunteer one day a week. They may go to a day program a couple days a week. They may go to multiple day programs throughout the week, depending on what their interests are and what the specific focus is of that day program. They might also choose to stay home or work a job a couple hours a week and then go to a day program. So there's a lot of flexibility and creativity that can go into meeting the needs of an individual throughout the day. So it's, retirement activities. We have some folks, excuse me, that love to go to senior citizen centers a couple days a week, or they go to day program a couple days a week. Um, and those choices can be directed by, like I said, the activities or the focus of those programs. It can even be what they choose to have for lunches on those days. Everybody chooses their focus a little bit differently. And your SSA is there to kind of help you navigate and manage what you want that to look like for your individual. Okay, next slide. Vocational habilitation is kind of more directed at folks that are looking to obtain employment in the community, but are maybe not quite there yet. So we do have some vocational opportunities throughout Greene County, and they really work on a plan towards, okay, within a year, 18 months, these are the goals that we need to work on to help this individual become employable. So it may be working on soft skills. It might be working on hygiene, appropriate relationships in a work environment. Because, going from high school to working in a job in the community, those supports are going to look a little bit different. Those environments are a little bit different. So sometimes we need kind of that little bit of an extra buffer between wanting a job and actually working towards getting that job placement. So we know we have some things we need to work on. Vocational opportunities are a really good chance to do that. Um, a lot of times we'll see vocational habilitation in connection with job coaching or individual employment supports where they may work a couple days a week, with a job coach and then do a vocational setting a couple days a week or a couple hours a week. And it just gives them another chance to work towards those employability skills in a safe and controlled environment. The next slide. And here's a little bit about individual employment supports and group employment supports. They're just what they sound like. Individual is going to be a one-on-one type setting, where group employment is going to be two or more individuals kind of working on similar goals and similar tasks to get towards that job or that employment level that an individual is wanting to. So it might be working on specific tasks at a job. A lot of times we'll see the individual and group employment supports kind of step in after OOD has phased out. Um, again, as just kind of a stair step down of, somebody being there and assisting an individual in a work setting to address any concerns, any little bit of extra support and skills that somebody might need in order to obtain or maintain employment in a specific setting. Okay, next slide. Adult day rate. These are all kinds of different services that are available through the adult portion or the adult day setting, adult waiver portions of your budgets. So career discovery, a lot of our folks don't necessarily know what kind of jobs are out there or what they might want to do. So career discovery is a good way to kind of explore interests, what's available, and just kind of help somebody other than maybe mom and dad who've been the ones asking, would you like to work here? How about working here? Um, sometimes our folks just want to hear it from somebody other than mom and dad or the teacher that they've had the last couple years. So career discovery can be an option for that. Self-employment plans. This may be somebody that wants to start their own business or open an Etsy shop or Twitch or Switch accounts, whatever those are. Again, I feel really old talking about some of these because I don't know what they are. But just different employment plans, whether it's, maybe doing their own lawn care, mowing for people up and down the street. It can look different in any situation, but it is a waiver service that's available. Situational observation and assessment can be just another set of eyes on how can we accommodate an individual in a work setting. Are there supports that need to be in place? Are there devices that could be used to make things more accessible, easier, a smoother work environment, those kind of things. Benefits education and analysis. This is a big one. This is taking a look at your individual's resources, their social security, and employment. So this is really looking at how much money can an individual make before putting their benefits at risk. As we all know, Social Security and Medicaid is always changing. So staying on top of what resources an individual can have, what their income needs to look like, that is a very specialized service that can be beneficial when folks are looking at trying to determine how much employment an individual can or should have. So obviously we don't want to work somebody out of their benefits, but we want to maintain that healthy balance between being able to have employment and still maintaining those benefits that they may need to keep the supports and services in place that they have. Career exploration goes a lot with career discovery and just looking at what's available. What can we look at? What are the options? Self-employment, again, similar to the self-employment plans. How do we do that? Do we develop a business plan? Is there competition in the area? Kind of helps to walk an individual through all of that process. Job development, again, is creating opportunities, networking, looking at opportunities within the area, taking into account transportation concerns. A lot of times big transportation providers may or may not cross county lines. So you need to look at where are you looking for employment, what do you want to do, and where you live. Worksite accessibility. Is there anything that needs to be done or provided to help make that job site accessible and safe for that individual who's wanting to work in the community? Okay, next slide. Non-medical transportation. So in Greene County, the current rate per trip for non-medical transportation is $26.53 per trip. That'll be changing July 1st, which is why the little stars are there. Per mile, you can see that rate in the chart there. Might be a little hard to see on the screen, but the difference between a modified and a non-modified vehicle is, are there structural changes that need to be made to the vehicle in order to safely transport an individual? The best example of this is tie downs for a wheelchair. Does an individual require tie downs to be safely transported? If they do, that becomes a modified vehicle. So that rate is going to be $1.36 per mile if it's one individual. If you're sharing that trip with other individuals, that cost can change a little bit. The per trip, the biggest thing to remember that is trip is start to stop. So let's say I leave my home and I go to the day program setting. That is one trip. When I leave the day program setting and come home, that is a second trip. So that $26.53 per trip can add up pretty quick. So when you're looking at taking into consideration budgets and all of your services coming out of one pot of money, you need to look at, again, how often are you choosing to go to day program? Are you working in the community? These are all things that your SSA is going to help you talk through and take a look at when you're designing your budget every year when you do your level of care and your annual redetermination. So there is a way that you can authorize non-medical transportation trips and miles depending on what you're doing that day. So you may have somebody that goes to a day program and then that day program takes an outing that day. So you might do a trip there, you might do miles for the outing for the day, and then another trip home. So when your SSA starts asking a bunch of detailed questions about, okay, what does your day look like? What kind of things are you going to be doing at this day program? This is why. This is how they help you to figure out exactly what the costs are going to be so that they can help you budget that waiver effectively. Excuse me, depending on which county you're in, that per trip cost is going to look a little bit different due to the different cost of doing business categories and funding ranges for each county. An example of this is, or why this is getting a trip in Adams County. Cost of living in Adams County is not quite going to be what it is in Franklin County. So the costs for services are a little bit higher in some counties. And so that's why the funding is a little bit different. If you have a question about what the rates are in your particular county, feel free to reach out to me afterwards, and I'm more than happy to walk you through that and talk through any of those questions. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talked a lot about waiver services, and in the beginning, when I talked about the waiting list assessment, we talked about alternative service options or alternative funding options. So as a county, we are responsible for roughly 40% of your waiver cost. So your local levy dollars, that's what that helps go towards. So when we're looking at the amount of services that we're authorizing as a county, we need to be good stewards of financial and fiscal resources. So we're going to look at what of all the options out there, what is going to be the best way to meet those needs. One option, especially in Greene County, is a popular choice is family support services. So within Greene County, eligible individuals who still live at home can receive up to $1,000 per calendar year to help to address some of those needs. Now, some of the ways that that $1,000 is spent can be respite services, does not have to be necessarily through a waiver certified provider. So you can do respite, you can do diapers, you can do, one-time equipment costs. There's a wide range of things that we can help meet some of those needs without necessarily going through the full waiver enrollment process. So in Greene County, before we look at waiver enrollment, we're going to look at your specific case and say, have they exhausted all of their family support service dollars before we look at waiver funding? If not, then we're going to help you and the SSA work together to figure out, is there a way that we can meet that need through family support and go from there? Another kind of the next option up is supported living dollars or local funds. So again, this is more on a case-by-case situation where we'll look at, again, is it a one-time need? Is it a very short-term, kind of crisis situation that we can help alleviate without the full-blown waiver enrollment? Local funds, we also in Greene County use this as a way to help pay for day programming and non-medical transportation for folks that are not enrolled on waivers. So we can use some of those local dollars to help pay for waiver services. Again, another, good use of this is kids transitioning out of high school. So they may or may not have a waiver yet when they leave high school, but we've committed to putting local dollars towards allowing those individuals to go to day programs within Greene County. Community resources, again, our eligibility folks and our SSAs are fantastic at reconnecting families with other resources in the county, whether it's food pantries, medical providers, just helping to establish connections in Greene County that, you never know, your SSA or the eligibility folks might know of an obscure resource that can help you to find an item or find a service or provide that local linkage to things that you may be needing. So those are all alternative options that we're going to take a look at before we proceed with waiver enrollment. Okay, next slide. In addition to waivers, these are some of the supports and services that are available specifically through Greene County. We have our transition coordinators who are involved in the schools. I'm sure most of you are familiar with them. And they kind of are helping to bridge that connection between the schools and what school life looks like with post-school. So how can we continue to help support individuals as they look to transition out of school, to make sure that families of school-age children know about the county board and know about the services available and how we can help. So we have our transition coordinators and our transition department that works with our community services division and providing activities and connections and resources. They're a really fun group of people that like to get our folks involved in all kinds of things. Diners Club, Nerf nights, all kinds of pizza parties and movie nights and fun things, just as kind of a way to get folks to know each other, because these may be folks that you could form a connection with and end up going to a day program together with. So it's a nice way to kind of help bridge all of those ages together and the services that we offer. Service and support administration or case management. These are the folks that are going to be your point of contact at the county board, especially if you have a waiver. They're going to help design the ISP or the individual service plan. And this is really what dictates the services and authorizations for those on waivers. It's going to address everything from medical needs, daily living, the things your individual is good at, the things they struggle with, risks, what's important to folks. And they are going to be your advocate. They're going to be the ones that are going to help you navigate the waiver system. They will help you navigate with providers and day programs. They can also provide linkage and referrals to other community resources. They're really going to be that person at the county board that is there for you and your family. We have a lot of fantastic SSAs that are very well connected with our families. They love to establish those relationships. And they are really there to support you and your family. So use them. That's what they're there for. They're more than happy to answer questions and be that connection and that resource. Provider support. They help our providers to navigate all the fun stuff like billing and certification and trainings, and making sure that they're working in conjunction with the SSAs and what is developed and established within the ISP to make sure that we are meeting the needs that are addressed in the ISP for our individuals. So they do a lot behind the scenes, working with us in the Medicaid department to answer any billing questions, provider certification, all the little nuances of maintaining waivers and supports for the individuals that we serve. Okay, next slide. Benefits coordination and assistance. Like I said before, with the benefits analysis, navigating Social Security is, an interesting process in and of itself. Trusts, including stable accounts and all of the protected trusts and other nuances that can go with setting aside money for individuals while still maintaining their Medicaid eligibility. All of this kind of works hand in hand, and we have a couple staff at the board office who are really great at working with families to answer any questions, helping to problem solve as situations come up. As again, everybody kind of returns to a new normal after COVID. Medicaid is starting to look a little bit more at their redeterminations and their annual processes. So we've had some hiccups with paperwork with families, folks getting letters that they may or may not understand. Your SSA or our benefits coordination staff are more than happy to answer those questions and be a resource for that as well. Continuous waiver support. We are always interacting with Job and Family Services and DODD to make sure that our folks are maintaining their eligibility for waivers, that our providers are getting paid, that our authorizations are accurate and up to date and reflect all of the rate changes, all the service definitions that have changed. Continually working with the SSAs to make sure that what they're authorizing within their service plans is still within the service definitions of rule changes, and just again, more behind the scenes work and coordination at the board office to make sure that services can run as smoothly as possible for individuals and families. Okay, next slide. GT independence. I'm just going to touch on those really quickly for folks that may have heard about GT independence. They are a contractor that works with DODD to help manage payments for self-directed services. So this is who you will hear from and communicate with, and your SSA will help you coordinate with if your individual chooses to utilize participant-directed goods and services, self-directed transportation, participant-directed HPC with independent providers. They are a third-party financial management system. And so they help us with all these negotiated rates, the rates that aren't set in stone. They can be a bit of a challenge to work with. But again, that's why you have your SSA to help you work through this and communicate with this financial management system to ensure that everything gets paid for and authorized as smoothly as possible. All right, next slide. And this is just a quick snapshot of the DODD website that goes along with the waiver services link that was shared. Supporting families is a really great section of the DODD website. You can click through and look at all of the various different areas of service within a county board, the different services available, and that's also where a bunch of the waiver information is going to be located. So you can see changes coming up, you can see changes that are in play, and that'll help answer some questions in a little bit more of a condensed manner than trying to read through the rules and decipher what all those changes mean. So the DODD website is a really great resource for families as well. Yep, and there's the waivers and services. So this is, again, they've got one-pagers on there. If you click through the waivers and the services, it'll give you a little bit more of a condensed version of what falls under those waivers and the service definitions. Okay. And just for those of you in Greene County, here are some of our staff that you will come in contact with, or if you have questions, you can reach out to myself. Like I said, I'm the fiscal services manager. I oversee the billing department and the Medicaid department and local funds and family support services and all those fun things. Tom Schaefer is our director of finance and administration. He is my direct supervisor. Tom's been around for quite a while and is a really fantastic resource. He does a lot of these presentations as well. Denise Somerville is our Director of Service and Support Administration, so she is over all of the SSAs and our behavior support staff. Chris Keith and Celeste Johnson are our two SSA managers. They're both really great resources if you have a question, if you need to get in touch with your SSA, or you just have some bigger programmatic questions. They're fantastic resources as well. We're all a pretty tight-knit group. We work together quite a bit. So if you have questions and you're not quite sure who to reach out to, you can reach out to any one of us, and we're more than happy to answer any questions or kind of point you in the right direction. And a couple minutes early, but that's all I had. And if you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
I just want to make sure everybody knows, and you said it within the presentation too, that if, well, a couple of things, if you're connected with a county board, whatever county you're in, County Board of Developmental Disability Services, if you are connected with them, then you can reach out to your SSA for, you can take this presentation and kind of go to them and say, look, this is what I learned. What does our county look like, in the sense of waivers? It gives you a starting point, maybe a point of discussion. But if you haven't worked with your County Board of Developmental Disabilities yet, um, Sheila or anybody that was on this contact list. I mean, the county boards work with each other, they talk to each other. If you're unsure of who your county board is, or you need to reach out to them to see about eligibility, you can ask any one of these guys, hey, I'm in whatever county and I'm not sure how to reach out. They can get you started, or just find them in the phone book, and that will get you the main desk and they'll help you too.
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions for Sheila? Any further questions about any of the slides that we looked at? There was a lot of information there. This is the beginning of, we have a couple months here of a lot of information, and this is the beginning. Waivers and funding was always a difficult topic to understand, especially with the changes and, over the course of the years. You had mentioned, Sheila, the home modifications, and during one of these presentations was the first time I heard about using one of the waivers for possible home modifications. And it's one of those things, if you have a question like happening around the home, like my child falls all the time going in and out of the tub, or falls down the steps, or something around the house that causes a concern, ask your SSA saying, hey, this is what's happening. Is there something that would be covered? Is there something here that could help us with this? So, and that's how we found out about, some of it was through one of these presentations, and I checked, and we did have some supports that we could get some adjustments made. So I don't know if you can elaborate on that any more than that, Sheila, or.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's kind of how most of our home modifications, our PDGS, adaptive equipment, assistive tech, that's how all of those conversations start. You do not have to wait until you have a scheduled meeting or an annual redetermination. Do not wait until that is coming up to have that conversation with your SSA. If you notice, like you just said, if your individual is starting to fall at home, or tripping getting in and out of the shower, reach out to your SSA. So what your SSA will do, like I said, at least here in Greene County, is they will kind of talk through what that need and what that problem is with you. In Greene County, we have our review committee that meets every week. And then usually what happens is the SSA will problem solve with their immediate supervisor and kind of talk through, okay, what exactly is going on in this specific situation. We may request to have an OT evaluation completed because they know a whole lot more about that stuff than I do. And so an OT can come in and make specific recommendations as to, okay, based on what we're seeing, X, Y, and Z, could be potential options for this individual to help address this need. We will take a look at that. We work with SWOCOG, Southwest Ohio Council of Governments, and they are fantastic at helping us, maximize folks' Medicaid cards so that we, if at all possibility, can get that paid for through their Medicaid card as opposed to waiver funding. They will help us get in touch with DME providers, contractors, and help us get that set up so that we can get that ball rolling, address all of the needs, the concerns, check all of our boxes with Medicaid so that we pass our audits later down the road, and then work to get that modification or that piece of equipment in place for you.
And that's exactly how I'm not from Greene, or we weren't from Greene County, but that's how it happened. Like you said, we had an OT come out, and then, then it just kind of went down that same list that you just that you just listed for the county we were in.
Yep. Yeah, we have SWOCOG currently works with, I believe, 5 counties in our region. And we share OTs. And so we get a lot of feedback from those other counties that we work with, to really kind of get some creative out of the box thinking to meet some of these needs. Like I said, we have our hierarchy of funding that we go through. Waiver funding is always going to be our payer of last resort, just because as a county, we are responsible for that match money towards it. So if we can maximize local resources, Medicaid card, insurance, all those things first, then we will help walk you through that process, to meet those needs as best that we can in the most financially responsible way.
And so and like I was saying, with Sheila being in Greene County, you have Greene County, but these other counties are very, very similar. So you want to start with your SSA, go and talk to them. If a lot of times parents say, well, I don't know what questions to ask, just discuss, this is what's going on, this is what we need. Maybe they got a job and maybe there's something there that needs addressed. Just talking to your SSA, or your support coordinator there at the county board is a great start.
Yep. Don't feel like you have any bizarre off the wall or, dumb questions. That's what they're there for. They're there to help you guys. So like Patty said, just start off with a conversation, and just say, look, I don't know what I need, but this is what's happening. And that's exactly what your SSA is there for. And just as if working with your SSA is just like working with anybody else. If it's not a good fit, that's okay. Everybody has different personalities, different ways of approaching situations. If you don't have that connection with your SSA, you can always request a different SSA. So there are processes and steps involved with that. And it again looks a little different in every county. But that's who's going to be your advocate. That's who's going to be your point of contact and who you want to have that relationship with. So if you don't feel like you're connecting or vibing with that SSA, that's okay. It's just like, you may not necessarily like every doctor you meet either. You can request a different one. So don't feel like you're going to hurt anybody's feelings or, anything like that. That is what we are here to do. We're here to work with you guys and help as best that we can. And we want to make that as smooth and as easy of a process as possible.
As I noted, too, in the chat box, I mentioned that it was a little further up. Some of the things that were mentioned during the presentation, the benefit analysis, some of the career discoveries and stuff. Last month, we talked a lot about employment, and we did have DODD, Keith Banner, come to talk. But we talked about OOD, the Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. They came and spoke, and different ones spoke about some of those points that you had touched on. So if you want to revisit any of that, I put the YouTube link there in the chat box. And also, this is the beginning, like I had mentioned before, this is the beginning of several. So this month we're looking at, like today was about waivers and funding. Next week during our lunch and learn, we have some speakers are going to talk about, my child is working, but could they lose their benefits? They're going to talk about understanding Medicaid and then the um, MBIWD, and I got to remember Medicaid buy-in, help me.
Medicaid
Medicaid
buy-in.
buy-in. Yeah,
Yeah, Medicaid buy-in, that's usually
that's what we always call
we
it,
just
Medicaid buy-in. I couldn't remember what the WD was for, but anyway, it's when your child works and some of the supports that are there. But we'll be talking about that next week, and then we're ending the month with Social Security, 2 weeks of Social Security, the SSI, SSDI, and then the work incentives is the other one, and then we're getting into guardianships and trusts next month. But yeah, we have a lot of several heavy topics in the next couple weeks that are all related and interlink. Um, all starting with this last month of employment and then going forward and all the benefits and how to work with them. It's a lot of topics and it's a lot of material. So we have the YouTube so you can revisit these um, presentations we're recording tonight, and you can listen to them and look at them. But if you ever have any questions, as all the presenters have been great about, if you have a question after listening to it later and saying, hey, what did you mean by this? Or what do I do about that? You can reach out to them. Um, and like Sheila said, you can reach out to them and they'll get the answer that they can get for you. So, is there any other questions here tonight for Sheila before we end? We did put a survey also out in the chat box if you could take a moment to take that survey, not for just to tonight, but we're talking about next season topics. If there are no questions, thank you, Sheila, for coming. I'm going to close the recording here just in case somebody wants to, you know, verbally ask a question. But I want to thank you for presenting and for all you that attended. So 1 second while I close that recording.